evidence and pictures and information. I mean, incredible, the amount of information. And, kind of documenting their journey leaving Germany, going to Shanghai, and eventually coming to the United States. And the family was kind enough to donate a large portion of those materials to the permanent collection here at the Jewish Museum Milwaukee. So we look forward to utilizing it on a much greater basis for a number of purposes. But we were able to highlight some of the information here. The other collection, it was kind of interesting. We were contacted by some colleagues in Madison that had let us know about this body of material, a grouping of 13 postcards that Michael Stern, who now lives in Colorado, but originally is from Racine, went to UW-Madison, had recently found. These 13 postcards were written by his maternal mother to her daughter, Mary, and son-in-law, George, who just prior to Kristallnacht decided to leave and wound up coming to the United States and settling in Racine, Wisconsin. So there's 13 of these postcards written back and forth to her daughter and son-in-law. He had wound up contacting his alma mater, wound up being connected with a professor in the Jewish Studies program named Amos Bitzan, who was teaching a story on Holocaust history. Really didn't have a lot of time when Michael contacted him. He was really just looking to get some help with translation. But when he read one, realized what he had, what was in his hands, and I mean, really he talks about the gift that it was, because he made it the focal point of this class. It was an opportunity to really get a first-hand look at the individual experience, which is much like what we see with Hetty, and of course with Edie and her parents, Gerda and Manfred, and her grandfather, Max, who also traveled to Shanghai. So,
and also lived in Racine.
And also lived in Racine, which is another connection too. That's right. So the three things we kind of talk about here, we tie the three narratives together, looking at, immigration, cross-continental communication, and ties to Wisconsin. So those are kind of the three factors. The other thing we did to kind of tie the three narratives together was to create this timeline, which was a bear, I will tell you, but a fantastic piece. So this timeline really looks at historical events, immigration policy, and individual consequences. So on the top is information pertaining to the three families, which are color-coded. There's a legend on the left, Henry Hall's story in purple, Edie's family story in blue, and the Stern Spirit family in green. And then the bottom half of this is all contextualizing information. Looking at what were some of the events that were happening locally. I mean, we look to Madison, we look across the state of Wisconsin, we look at, what's going on across the country, what's going on internationally. And we also have a number of charts looking at statistics in terms of visas, which a major factor. We talked about the Evian Conference, which was held in July of 1938, and basically 32 countries attended. It was called by President Roosevelt, who called this group together. The idea was, of course, there were millions of people trying to immigrate. Countries around the world were still kind of reeling from getting over World War I. The US was getting over the Depression. Economies were still in turmoil. And there was this real concern with bringing people in that would take jobs away from Americans. Also, this fear of kind of the stranger, the immigrant. A lot of what we see going on today, which is one of the reasons we felt like it was really important to look at this. So much of what has been going on recently, there's so many parallels. I mean, the people are looking to get away for the same reasons. People are looking to escape violence, persecution, to be reconnected with loved ones, reunited with loved ones. All of those things are parallels. So we're looking at this as a real vehicle and an opportunity, much like we did with the original exhibit run, which we did a series on immigration. This, we're doing that as well, but looking at quite a bit more of the contemporary situation and what some of those those parallels are, what are the lessons we've learned, what are the lessons we haven't. So we talk about here, this is kind of an overview connecting with just kind of highlights of what these three stories are. When Michael's parents, Mary and George Stern, fled, Mary, like so many others in Germany, felt like the situation is going to blow over and chose to stay. I know Edie's parents, in reading a lot of the information, you know, there was just so much of this feeling of, we're Germans first. Germany's our home, Germany's our culture. You know, this isn't, you know, why would something bad happen to us? Why would, you know, they were just, and who could have imagined? I mean, it's surreal. You could never have imagined or foretold what was to come. So, you know, by the time they left, Germany invades Poland December 1st, 1939, but even prior to that, which, as it had been stated, the immigration policy was such that the Nazis were trying to get all the Jews out. The policy at that point was we were trying to get them out. Although prior to, you know, 41, which things really start shifting, when the policy then is really, we're rounding Jews up, centralizing them, deporting them, working towards genocide, which, you know, comes in part two, which with the Wannsee Conference, which is, you know, how do we deal with this final solution? What are we going to do to get rid of the Jews? So once Sarah realized she's caught up in all this, like so many of the other Jews in Germany, with many of the other Jews, she's then deported to Poland. The postcards, which we will look at, not only kind of show her physical movement, they show her going, the first letter comes from Krakow, then there's a second from Volgograd, and then the remaining 11 are from Gorlice. And we know in Gorlice that a ghetto has been set up. She's telling us certain things as well. We also have to assume, based on the knowledge of the censorship situation, that she's not allowed to tell us everything. You know, there's certain things she can't say. So it's about reading what's there, but also about reading between the lines. You know, you can tell from the things she's talking about, the scarcity of supplies, you know, the crowded situation, the need for money, all of these things, you can tell the situation is becoming more and more dire. The last communication they receive is November of 41 from Gorlice, Poland. They never hear from Sarah again. We don't know the exact circumstances under which she perished, but we know she perished in the Holocaust. So here we talked about earlier, so we talked about the Edie Conference here. And down here we talk about Kristallnacht, which of course takes place in November 1938, which is a huge impetus. Whereas, you know, a lot of Jews at that point may have been thinking things are going to blow over. At that point, that event is kind of like, okay, we got to get out. So that starts this, you know, another kind of, you know, mass, you know, hysteria in terms of trying to get out. Here we talk about the routes of escape. And of course, we don't talk about all of them, but basically it's stated at the Evian Conference of the 32 countries that participated, only the Dominican Republic stepped forward to say, we will take additional people. Of course, we've heard of things like, you know, the stories about the St. Louis, which the boat that went to Cuba, just shy of 1,000 Jewish individuals, primarily German Jews, on board. While they're on the water, Cuba changes immigration policy. They arrive, they're not allowed to deboat, and they're ultimately sent back. The majority of those Jews are killed in concentration camps. So there are, you know, so much of this is about, you know, the immigration, the obstacles that were in place, and as I said, a lot of food for thought when we think about everything that's going on today in terms of immigration situation. So why don't we go this way, and then we can go, so this is the Sparrow Stern family. Here's Sarah. Here's George and Mary on the SS Britannica en route to the United States. So their original name is actually Sternreich, and when they got to the United States,